To another episode of Mortgage Made Simple. I'm Blake Overton and I'm your host today as always. Guys, lots of stuff recently in the news about mortgages. You know, in the last episode, we talked about the mortgage rates and the headlines that were coming out about mortgage rates decreasing, and they did for a little bit, but they've come back up a little bit since then. And right now we have the government shutdown. That's what happens when the adults that are in charge of the money and how to spend it can't agree on how to spend it. It leads us to a government shutdown. In simple terms, what does that mean? Does that mean that the military goes home or that the president unplugs the Wi-Fi and stays off Twitter for a couple days? No, it just means that there's a whole lot of federal workers that are not working right now. And it means that there are certain government programs that hit pause, and anything that relies on these programs could be delayed. And so if you're thinking, yeah, but how does that affect me? Or does that affect me while I'm looking to buy a house? The answer is it might, maybe. It depends on what type of loan that you're getting. It depends on where the property is that you're buying and whether certain government systems stay up and running at this time. So this isn't the first time though that we've been here, guys. We've had a government shutdown before. Back in 2018, late 2018 and early 2019, there was a government shutdown. I believe the longest in history at 35 days long. And I remember it clearly. I remember working on loans at that time. I remember a loan that did get delayed during that time. We got through it, but it was unexpected. Right now, with that being in the news, it's nothing to freak out about by any means, but it's something to pay attention to, and it's something to stay on top of, and it's something to plan ahead for if you're in the market looking for homes, or if you're a realtor helping your buyers select the right home loan program, etc. Again, if you're pre-approved or you're under contract on a house right now, or a realtor showing homes, then this episode is definitely for you. So stick around and let's get into it, because I'm going to talk about really three main things here. We're going to talk about who might be on hold or stuck waiting during this process. We're going to talk about who still gets a loan during a government shutdown. Some fine details on what a government shutdown actually is, but not too in depth. And we're going to talk about what we are doing to keep deals moving during this time of a government shutdown. So let's dig right in. So you might be wondering, why does the government have anything to do with my mortgage in the first place? I'm not borrowing money directly from the government. I'm working with a bank. I'm working with a lender, right? Well, here's the simple explanation for that. Most mortgages in the U.S. are backed or insured by federal programs. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, for example, are government-sponsored enterprises that buy up most home loans so that lenders have more money to lend. And FHA, USDA, and VA loans are directly guaranteed or insured by those government agencies. And for example, flood insurance, that comes sometimes through FEMA. And so behind the scenes, we use federal systems like the IRS and Social Security Administration to verify your income and your identity. So when parts of the government shut down, these systems don't always keep running at full speed. That's when delays start to happen. Now, if you want to dig in more into a backstory about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and what privatization could mean for your mortgage, because that's been in the news too, that's been in the headlines. So if you want to check out more about that, you can go back to one of my past episodes and check out more about that. But now that we understand how the government has a hand in on your mortgage to begin with, let's talk about what the shutdown could affect. So first of all, if you're using a conventional loan, FHA loan, or VA loan, the good news is that these loans are still going to fund during a shutdown. So they're not fully dependent on government budgets, so they just keep moving. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're immune to any delays. The bigger risk here is the verifications that happen behind the scenes. So for example, IRS transcripts, social security number validations, if those systems are offline, then it can hold up your final approval depending on investor requirements. We're just front loading those checks and getting everything in order just in case. Number two, you have IRS and Social Security Administration verification systems. These systems are used to verify your identity and income. So we use a form called a 4506C to request tax transcripts. A Social Security Administration verifies your name and your Social Security number. If those systems go down, then some investors will still let us close and we'll just verify it after, but others don't. And so it depends. We're identifying which files of ours need early pulls now so that we don't get caught off guard during this. Now, the big one here during a government shutdown is the USDA loans. If you are using a USDA loan, this right here is the most vulnerable. Why? Because USDA is a federal agency and they stop issuing new loan guarantees during a shutdown. And so that means that if your lender or we don't already have a conditional commitment from USDA, then your file stalls out until USDA returns. This is where things are changing fast. Many USDA buyers who expected to close with zero down are maybe having to pivot right now. So loan officers across the country are looking at alternatives. That might mean a backup loan program or an FHA scenario or a down payment assistance program. It could affect the rates. It could affect a lot of different things. Right now, it's really important if you are looking into USDA loans that you understand that this government shutdown could stall that out. And if you're a seller on a home and no one's notified you of this and you get a USDA offer, that's also something to keep in mind too, that your sale could get delayed. So it doesn't just affect buyers, it also affects the sellers out there. The last thing that does typically get affected in government shutdowns is flood insurance. Homes in flood zones typically require flood insurance through FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program. If the National Flood Insurance Program isn't reauthorized, then no new policies can be issued. That means that you cannot close. So we're identifying any flood zone properties now. Luckily, I don't have any in the pipeline, but if that's a concern, that's something that you want to know as well. Here's just overall how we're handling these things. So behind the scenes, we're already pulling these IRS and Social Security Administration verifications early. We're flagging USDA loans and flood zone loans as a company, and we're reviewing USDA files for alternative loan options, and we're preparing those alternative loan paths where needed. So if it's FHA to VA or maybe a bond program, down payment assistance, and also communicating with all of the folks that are involved in the process, like title, settlement agents, realtors, etc. And so this isn't about fear or anything. It's just about being ready. Buyers and agents really need to stay ahead of this and pay attention to the loan programs and keep tabs on where this government shutdown leads us to. So there it is. There's just some basic, simple information on how the government shutdown does affect mortgages. So if you're using conventional FHA or VA, chances are you're fine, you're in the clear. But if you are buying with USDA or in a flood zone, that's going to be two of the most common scenarios that are affected or the most vulnerable during a government shutdown. So there could be some turbulence along the way when it comes to those two scenarios. So if you're unsure what kind of loan you're using or whether your file might be affected, reach out to your lender, or you can head on over to clearmortgageplan.com and you can schedule a check-in or consultation with me. And again, if you ever want to go deeper on how Fannie and Freddie work behind the scenes, check out the episode I mentioned, one of my previous episodes about Fannie and Freddie. And we'll be back next time with another Mortgage Made Simple. Until next time, plan smart, stay ready, and let's keep your move on track.